Chapter 1. Aunt Iris, I've made up my mind. I'm going to honor my marriage agreement with Ethan. I'll be back in a month to marry him. The morning light filled the quiet bedroom. I lowered my head, my voice calm after long deliberation. "Oh, thank heavens, my dear, you've finally come to your senses," my aunt exclaimed. "Adrienne Sterling was engaged to you for 4 years and never once mentioned marriage, leaving you to be the subject of gossip. You and that Ethan kid grew up next door to each other. Whenever you were in trouble, he was always the first to protect you. He was just asking me about you a few days ago. It seems your parents knew what they were doing when they arranged that match for you as children." Aunt Iris was surprised at first, then broke into a joyful laugh, her years of persuasion finally paying off. She hastily hung up, eager to share the good news with my mother and Ethan. Once the call ended, the bedroom fell silent, and the boisterous laughter from downstairs became much clearer. Today was the day Adrienne's unforgettable first love, Sylvie Monroe, returned to the country. The Sterlings, being close with her family, were throwing a welcome party for her. I let out a heavy sigh and drew a red X on the calendar by the bed, silently counting down in my head. 29 days left. But just then, Adrienne's indifferent voice came from behind me, startling me. "What are you drawing?" Adrienne had more pressing matters on his mind and wasn't truly interested in what I was doing. Before I could even answer, he quickly added what he really wanted to say. "Sylvie is back. As my fiancé, you should at least go downstairs." I didn't know when Adrienne had entered the room. Perhaps he was worried about what Sylvie might think, because he forewent his usual composure and, without knocking, pulled me off the bed and down the stairs. Adrienne was as coolly detached as ever, but I knew him well enough to hear the reprimand in his tone. The moment I sat down, the cheerful atmosphere at the dining table evaporated into silence. His mother, Beatrice, who could never hide her feelings, was the first to mutter jinx under her breath. His father, Arthur, tacitly put down his chopsticks. I instinctively pressed my lips together. Grandpa Sterling, however, placed the best piece of braised pork in my bowl, his smile kind. "Clara, have you lost weight again? It's all that brat Adrienne's fault for not taking care of you." "Eat up," Sylvie Monroe stared intently at me, a flicker in her lively eyes. She tilted her head and smiled sweetly. "You must be Clara, right? I'm so envious of you. All you did was save Adrienne 5 years ago, and Grandpa Sterling handpicked you to be the Sterling's daughter-in-law. All the socialites in our circle say you're a gutter snipe in silk. I have to say, you're incredibly lucky." Adrienne frowned slightly and glanced at me. "Sylvie's used to being spoiled, so she's a bit blunt. You'll have to be patient with her." "I am not," Sylvie pouted, shooting him a playful glare. She picked up a piece of crab and tossed it into my bowl, her eyes blinking with faux innocence. "You've probably never had crab before, have you, Clara? You should eat more." I've always been known for being quiet and gentle. In the past, I would have just gritted my teeth and endured it, but now I was leaving. I had no intention of putting up with this nonsense anymore. "Miss Monroe, there's no need for the passive-aggressive act. You may not like me, but I don't think you're so great either. Let's just not speak to each other." My words hung in the air. The Sterlings all froze, looks of astonishment on their faces. Adrienne was the first to react. He shot me a cold glare and slammed his fork down on his ceramic plate. Sylvie had never been spoken to like that in her life. She grabbed a bowl of hot soup from the table and hurled it straight at me. My face stung with a searing pain. The thick, hot liquid trickled down my cheek, and a piece of vegetable was stuck pathetically in my hair. Before I could say a word, Sylvie let out a cry of pain. "Ouch, it hurts." The few remaining drops of soup had splashed onto her hand. She clutched it, her eyes welling up with pitiful tears. In an instant, the entire Sterling family crowded around Sylvie, fussing over her hand. Beatrice shot me a dagger-like look, her voice laced with concern as she took Sylvie's hand. "It's all red. And these are the hands of a pianist, you? Why did you have to argue with her?" A rare look of alarm crossed Adrienne's usually calm face. He grabbed his car keys from the table and put an arm around Sylvie. "You have a competition the day after tomorrow. I'm taking you to the hospital." Sylvie stomped her foot petulantly, her voice rising in a tearful cry. "Adrienne, is this really your future wife? No one has ever spoken to me like that. I don't care. I want her to apologize." Adrienne glanced at my disheveled state, his dark eyes flickering for a moment before he said in a low voice, Sylvie, you were also at fault. Sylvie's lip trembled, and tears streamed down her face. What did I do wrong? She choked out. Was anything I said not the truth? I'm not going to the hospital unless she apologizes. Grandpa Sterling spoke up hesitantly, his expression conflicted. Clara, I know you feel wronged, but the Monroe family values Sylvie's hands very much. Adrienne's dark eyes turned to me, his gaze unwavering, the meaning unmistakable. Clara, you were never one to be so petty. Why are you being so difficult today? Her competition is very important. We can't risk any injury to her hands. Sylvie had insulted me first. Sylvie had thrown the hot soup at me first, but Adrienne was still telling me to apologize. I stared at him, stunned. In the past, even if he was distant, he would have been the one rushing me to the hospital, and he would have dealt with anyone who was being unreasonable until they came to apologize. But the moment Sylvie arrived, everything changed. I was born into an ordinary family and had a crush on Adrienne since high school, thinking our paths would never cross. Then, 5 years ago, angry that Sylvie was going abroad, Adrienne went drag racing and crashed on a remote road. I saved him. Grandpa Sterling, a man who valued gratitude, arranged for Adrienne to be engaged to me. The rest of the Sterlings had protested fiercely, refusing to accept it, but Adrienne himself had agreed. For 4 years, I woke up early every single day, without fail, to make him a different kind of breakfast. At night, I would wait up for him under a small lamp until the early hours of the morning. I had delivered urgent documents to him while running a high fever in the dead of winter. I had held an umbrella for him in the drizzling summer rain, reminding him to wear another layer. When Adrienne caught a severe flu, even his own mother kept her distance. But I stayed by his bedside day and night, personally brewing and feeding him herbal medicine. When he was in a bad mood, I worried he'd do something reckless and would follow him quietly, never backing down even when he snarled at me to get lost. I would always look at the silver ring on my finger, telling myself over and over that Adrienne must have some feelings for me. Chapter 2. But now it seemed his heart was colder than stone. In the end, I had failed to warm it. I didn't apologize. I simply turned and went upstairs. Uncouth brat, she should just rot in some backwater town for the rest of her life, Beatrice snapped, her eyes following me up the stairs as she gently patted Sylvie's shoulder to comfort her. Adrienne's arm around Sylvie tensed. He stared at my quiet, obedient back, a barely perceptible frown creasing his brow as a strange sense of unease settled over him. The moment I closed my bedroom door, I was enveloped in darkness. I lowered my head, my expression unreadable. The sound of Adrienne's car engine starting was sharp and urgent, making my ears ache. I had lived here for 4 years, and this was the first time I had ever seen him in such a hurry. A few blisters had formed on my cheek from the burn. I found the first aid kit and began treating the wound in front of the mirror. Halfway through, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. When I answered, it was Sylvie's voice. Adrienne, it hurts so much. After the hospital, can we go racing? You always used to take me racing when I was upset. Then came Adrienne's voice, a mix of helplessness and doting affection. Anything for you, as long as you cooperate with the doctor. And I want you to bake me a cake yourself. My hand is hurt, so you'll have to feed it to me. All right, all right. Does your hand still hurt? I didn't want to hear anymore. I hung up. Racing had once nearly cost him his life. Adrienne had sworn he would never touch a race car or alcohol again. Yet, he had agreed to Sylvie's unreasonable demands without a second thought. I had long heard that Sylvie Monroe was bright and flamboyant, that Adrienne had always doted on her like she was his little son. After she went abroad, she became his unforgettable first love, the one he kept his distance from all other socialites for, just so she wouldn't get upset. They said he would pluck the moon from the sky for her if she asked. It seemed it was all true. Since I had decided to leave, there was no point dwelling on these things. I blocked the number and gathered the few things I wanted to take with me, packing them into a small suitcase that I hid in the back of the closet. While looking for a charging cable, I saw the diaries in my nightstand. 3 thick volumes, chronicling the journey from my naive youth to the long years after entering adulthood. Every page was a silent testament to the love I once held for Adrienne. I slowly slipped the plain engagement ring from my finger and tucked it inside one of the diaries. As if making a final offering to the unresolved feelings of my youth, I threw the diaries and the ring into the trash. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Adrienne walked in, holding a tube of burn ointment. He noticed I didn't rush to greet him as I usually did. He pressed his lips together, opening his mouth several times as if to speak, but didn't know what to say. "Your face, it's fine," I cut him off coolly. Then I turned and saw a faint, telltale lipstick mark on his white shirt collar. I froze for a second, then quickly composed myself. "I'm tired. I want to rest." When Adrienne saw the large blisters on my cheek, his dark eyes widened in alarm. A flash of worry crossed his face as he grabbed my arm. "A girl's face is important. I'll take you to the hospital." "What if it scars?" The heat from my arm was unnaturally high. Adrienne paused, stunned for a moment. The next second, he pressed his hand to my forehead, his voice tinged with an undeniable panic. "You have a fever." I found it all deeply ironic. He was the one who had forced me to apologize to Sylvie, and now he was the one putting on this show of concern. It was all stick and carrot, giving with one hand and taking with the other. I pulled my arm away. "I'll go to the doctor myself tomorrow. The hospitals are all closed now anyway." Adrienne let out a sigh of relief. "You're right. Sylvie needs to go tomorrow too. I'll take you both. Should I get you some fever medicine now?" When I didn't answer, a faint sense of unease washed over him. He felt something was off. Just as he was about to speak again, Sylvie burst into the room and clung to his arm. "Adrienne, I'm staying at your place for a few days. Aren't you happy?" "What are you doing just standing there?" "I can't sleep." "Come tell me a bedtime story." Adrienne glanced at me hesitantly. "Sylvie, how about I do it tomorrow? But if I don't sleep well tonight, I'll do poorly in my piano competition tomorrow." Sylvie's eyes immediately reddened at the corners. She looked up at him, her dark, watery eyes pleading. Adrienne's expression changed. He cast aside all other thoughts, gently stroking Sylvie's head as he said softly, "All right, I'll go find a book." I was already used to Adrienne's favoritism. After they left, I picked up my phone and contacted my dance master. He had always been kind to me. Since I was leaving, I had to at least say a proper goodbye and take care of the paperwork. I had worked my fingers to the bone at the dance troupe for years and had finally achieved some success, performing on stage several times. Now, as one of the senior dancers, I was mentoring a dozen younger girls. The reason I had to stay for a month was to finish teaching them the last of the curriculum. I woke up extra early the next day to avoid Adrienne and Sylvie. But as I was saying goodbye to my dance master, I ran into them anyway. The master smiled and took Sylvie's hand, introducing her to me. "This is Sylvie, the rising piano prodigy. She's so passionate and straightforward. We collaborated once before. She just finished a performance, and I heard she won first prize again." Sylvie linked her arm through mine affectionately and lowered her head in a show of modesty. "Clara and I are good friends. I'm not as good as you say." The master raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You two know each other. What a small world. Well, I'll let you two chat. The troupe is calling for me." Sylvie hummed in agreement and then held up her hand, showing me the ring on her finger. "Isn't it beautiful? I won first prize, and even though I said I didn't want a gift, Adrienne insisted on getting me this. It's so annoying. I mean, who gives a ring as a gift? People who don't know any better might think it's a proposal. Everyone in our circle knew Adrienne had never mentioned marriage to me. Sylvie was clearly digging at me. I didn't want to engage. I was about to walk away when Sylvie suddenly grabbed my hand forcefully and tried to make me touch the ring. I struggled for only a moment before she let out a cry and fell to the ground with a thud. Chapter 3. "Clara, what are you doing?" Adrienne rushed over in a panic, shoved me aside, and knelt down to anxiously check on Sylvie. Sylvie sobbed and held her hand out to Adrienne. The finger with the ring had a deep red mark on it from where she'd been grabbed. Her eyes welled with tears as if she had suffered a great injustice. "Adrienne, I did what you said and came to apologize to her. But when Clara saw the ring on my hand, she went crazy. She insisted I take it off, and when I refused, she tried to snatch it. I know I have a bad temper, but you know I never lie, Adrienne. I don't understand why, even after I apologized, Clara would still treat me like this." Sylvie bit her lip hard, stubbornly holding back her tears, looking as fragile as a lily in a cold wind. Adrienne's heart ached. He gently stroked Sylvie's head and wiped the tears from her eyes, coaxing her. It's okay, Sylvie. I'll take you racing. I'll grant you any wish you make. A spark lit up in Sylvie's eyes, and she perked up immediately. Really? Of course, he turned back to look at me, his dark eyes hardening as he stared coldly. Clara, when did you become so vicious? I gave her that ring. If you have a problem, take it up with me. Why are you taking it out on Sylvie? You have a ring too. Why do you need to snatch someone else's? As soon as he said it, Adrienne's eyes instinctively flicked to my hand, only to find it bare. He froze, his voice rising. Where's your ring? I forced a twisted smile. So, rings could be given away so casually. Just 4 years ago, Adrienne had carefully and seriously placed the ring on my finger. For once, his usually indifferent eyes had held a smile as he told me gently that a ring represented a lifetime commitment, something that could only be given to a future wife. My heart had fluttered for so long back then. I really thought we would get married. But I had waited for 4 years. I waited until everyone said I was a toad trying to eat swan meat, until even the Sterling's housekeeper dared to boss me around, but I never got a proposal from Adrienne. I must have forgotten it at home, I said nonchalantly. Adrienne found this strange, and the strangeness was quickly replaced by a panic that grew inside him, so intense that his grip loosened, and he almost dropped Sylvie. He remembered a time when I had lost my ring while swimming. I had searched the pool all night, finally scooping it up with my bare hands. I had hugged him and cried for a long time, saying I would never take it off again, not even if it killed me. Adrienne couldn't help but reflect for a moment. Since Sylvie's return, he had indeed focused most of his attention on her, neglecting me to some extent. But I had always been so quiet and understanding, he thought I would get it. After all, I had loved him for so many years. In the past, even when he yelled at me or gave me the silent treatment, I would still greet him the next morning with a smile and a glass of warm milk. With that thought, Adrienne's gaze softened slightly. You should come to the hospital with us, he said in a low voice. Get your face checked out at the same time. Sylvie's eyes widened and she kicked her legs in protest. Adrienne, have you forgotten how she just treated me? She said in disbelief. A look of difficulty appeared on Adrienne's face again. He wavered between the two of us, as if facing an impossible dilemma. I needed to go to the hospital for medication this afternoon anyway, but at this moment, I couldn't bear to look at them for another second. No, thank you, I said calmly. With that, I hailed a cab and went to the hospital myself. As I was coming out of the dermatology department, I ran into Adrienne heading my way. Clara, what did the doctor say? Adrienne strode over, raising his hand to lift my mask, but I subtly dodged him. Before I could speak, a nurse walking towards us looked at the prescription and then at me. Clara Hayes, right? Dr. Matthews said you're leaving town in a couple of days, so you're only taking half the dosage for the herbal medicine. Is that correct? Leaving. Where are you going? Adrienne's heart skipped a beat. His hand shot out and grabbed mine in a panic, his usual good manners forgotten in his haste. He cried out in the hospital corridor, Where are you going? I managed a small smile and pulled my hand away. The dance troupe is just going out of town for a performance. Adrienne let out a sigh of relief, but he still asked worriedly, How many days will you be gone? Where to? Don't let it delay our wedding. So he did remember that. A sarcastic smile touched my lips. Just a few days, I said lightly, to a small town nearby. Adrienne thought for a moment, then took out his phone to check his schedule. I happen to be free in a couple of days. I'll go with you. I frowned in annoyance. There's no need. You'll feel out of place at the troupe. Adrienne slowly shook his head, his expression determined, his dark eyes stubborn. I won't disturb you. You can all just go about your business. He had a natural air of authority, the kind that didn't take no for an answer. If this continued, the more I refused, the more insistent he would become. I fell silent for a moment, then played my trump card. Sylvie has her piano semifinals in a couple of days. Aren't you going to watch? If you really want to come, bring her along next time. It'll save her the trouble of picking a fight with me. As expected, my words silenced him. After a long pause, he nodded, a faint smile on his lips. All right then, we can't leave Sylvie out. There will be plenty of opportunities like this in the future anyway. After dropping me off at home, Adrienne went to his room to handle some work. I had just walked in the door when my phone vibrated. It was the dance master. Clara, I've watched you grow up. You have the best flexibility and adaptability of anyone. I promised someone a performance, but I sprained my ankle at the last minute. Could you do me a favor and take my place? If you don't have time, one of the junior dancers you mentor could also do it. I stared at my phone, pursing my lips. I wasn't keen on taking on extra responsibilities right before I was due to leave, but my master had taught me for so many years. Back then, seeing that my family wasn't well off, he had only charged me half the tuition. I knew I had to repay this debt. In the end, I agreed. Not long after I sent the message, there was a knock on my door. It was Sylvie. Chapter 4. Clara, your master was supposed to dance for me at my next competition, but she sprained her ankle. You'll be taking her place. Sylvie paused deliberately after saying her piece, her bright, dark eyes fixed on me, the meaning behind her words crystal clear. I don't have time. I'm not doing it. I was stunned, surprised to learn that the person my master was talking about was Sylvie. But I couldn't bring myself to call her Sister Sylvie or get into an argument with her. After my cold reply, I moved to shut the door. Sylvie was quick to block it. Dropping the pretense, she crossed her arms and said haughtily, "You've already agreed. It's not up to you. We don't get along. We wouldn't be able to coordinate on stage. Besides, I have something else to do that day. I'll have one of my best junior dancers take my place." I thought for a moment and offered a solution. Sylvie scoffed, a flicker of contempt in her eyes. "Are you scared?" Just then, Adrienne came out, having heard the commotion. "Adrienne, Clara's dance troupe is backing out. They won't dance for me. What am I going to do? My competition is the day after tomorrow." Sylvie, who had been so aggressive just a second ago, suddenly turned pale. Her lips trembled and her hands clenched nervously at her sides. "If I don't have a dancer tomorrow, I'll lose. 5 years of hard work will all go down the drain. If that happens, I might as well just die." She clutched her head in anguish, stumbling back a few steps in a daze. Her hands anxiously picked at her wrists, and her gaze became hollow. Adrienne gasped, terrified. He rushed to embrace Sylvie, his hands trembling as he fumbled for the medication he always carried and frantically put it in her mouth. His eyes were bloodshot with alarm. "Sylvie, snap out of it, don't hurt yourself." Without asking for any details, he shot up and roared at me, "Don't you know Sylvie has severe anxiety? You spend all day stretching on a bar. What's the big deal about performing on stage for once? Was it necessary to give her such a sour face and make her anxious? If anything happens to Sylvie, I'll sue your dance troupe so none of you can ever dance again. Clara Hayes, if you're going to be this selfish, you can spend the rest of your life as a sacrifice for Sylvie's dream." Seeing Adrienne's distorted, furious face, I felt a wave of dizziness. Adrienne knew the girls in the dance troupe came from ordinary families. He knew how hard they worked, how long they had practiced just for a chance to perform, their toenails raw and bloody. In the past, when I was covered in bruises from dancing, Adrienne would gently apply ointment. His eyes red as he held me and repeated how hard dancing was, how he wanted to help those kids get a stage to perform on. But now, for Sylvie's unreasonable tantrum, he was willing to crush the dream I had held for over 20 years, to sacrifice the futures of more than 30 girls just to appease her. Some people's dreams were dreams. Others, it seemed, weren't even worthy of mention. Seeing my pale, faltering form, Sylvie couldn't help but smirk. Tucked in Adrienne's arms, her smile was triumphant. She stuck her tongue out at me and then, for good measure, gave me the middle finger. A long moment passed. My vision blurred and my eyes stung with unshed tears. I managed a bitter smile, my throat dry. "Fine, I'll dance for Sylvie. And please leave the people at the dance troupe alone." Chapter 5. "No, Clara, have you been faking it all this time? You can't even keep the beat." We were alone in the practice room. Sylvie slammed her hands on the piano keys, producing a jarring, dissonant sound. She shot up from her seat and, in a fit of pique, hurled a heavy music book straight at me. I cried out in pain, clutching my bruised forehead as I glared at her coldly. "Sylvie Monroe, are you ever going to stop?" For days, Sylvie had been finding fault with me. Either I was off beat, or my movements weren't up to standard. During breaks, she would scold me for being lazy if I took so much as an extra sip of water. She even brought a rattan cane to take out her frustrations on me. The other day, I was suffering from terrible cramps during my period. Sylvie had smashed the cup of hot brown sugar water I'd brought. Seeing me bent over in pain, she'd fetched a basin of ice water from the bathroom and poured it over my head, smugly clapping her hands and saying she was just helping me perk up. At my words, a look of contempt flashed in Sylvie's eyes. She showed no remorse, instead raising her eyebrows with even more arrogance. Leaning in close to my ear, she blinked innocently. "What? Is Clara sis angry?" I let out a cold laugh and pushed her away, stating with certainty, "Sylvie Monroe, you're faking it, aren't you?" After agreeing to dance for Sylvie, I knew she would make things difficult for me. I had gone home and memorized the score and rhythm until I knew them by heart. Just in case, I had even watched many of her previous competitions to study her style. But over the past few days, I realized that the effortless skill she displayed in her recent competition was nowhere to be seen. Her playing was sluggish and rushed. It wasn't that I was offbeat, it was that Sylvie couldn't keep up with a normal tempo at all. "Clara, don't blame me for your own terrible dancing." Sylvie tried to feign composure, but her darting eyes betrayed her instantly. She had hired a ghost player, but she had been so careful when they met. How could Clara have possibly found out? "What's wrong?" Adrienne had just pushed open the door to the practice room to find a tense atmosphere. Seeing the look on Sylvie's face, a flicker of concern crossed his dark eyes. He strode over and felt her forehead. "Sylvie, are you not feeling well?" Sylvie panicked, terrified that I would expose her in front of Adrienne. Her hands, hanging by her sides, trembled slightly. Seeing Adrienne's concern, she decided to go all in. Biting her lip, her eyes welled with tears as she sniffled pitifully. "Adrienne, I'm fine. It's just that Clara couldn't keep up with the rhythm and then accused me of faking my playing. I got so angry that I hit her with the music book. Are you mad at me?" Hearing this, Adrienne's gaze fell on the large bruise on my forehead. A flash of pity crossed his eyes. He was about to raise his hand to gently touch it, but then he remembered my accusation against Sylvie, and his hand slowly dropped. Seeing this, Sylvie covered her face with her hands as if to hide her distress, her sobs small and choked. "Adrienne, you know I spent 5 years away from home, suffering so much abroad just to practice the piano. I know Clara doesn't like me, but the piano is my everything. How could she slander me like that?" Adrienne's brow furrowed. After a moment, his gaze shifted to me, his dark eyes filled with clear condemnation. "Clara," he scolded, "you shouldn't have said that to Sylvie. She may be a bit blunt, but she would never do something so disgusting and underhanded." As he spoke, Sylvie's face stiffened, and she forced a laugh in agreement. I, however, just sneered inwardly. A flicker of sarcasm passed through me. I wondered if Adrienne would still be so protective of his dear sister, if he knew she really was a fraud. I gave Sylvie's ashen face a meaningful look. "Is that so?" Sylvie seemed to sense the threat. She clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms, completely unaware. In a corner where Adrienne couldn't see, her usually harmless eyes now stared at me with a sinister, vicious glint. She had worked so hard to get to where she was, to finally earn the approval of her parents and Adrienne. She would absolutely not let Clara Hayes ruin everything with that thought. An idea began to form in Sylvie's mind. Chapter 6. I no longer had the energy to expose Sylvie's deception, nor could I be bothered with Adrienne's blind accusations. I just wanted to get out of there, to never have to see Adrienne again. Back at the house, I took out my phone. The red X's on the calendar were a stark reminder, only 4 days left. And in 4 days, it would be time for Sylvie's performance. "What is this?" Adrienne, who had come in with a glass of hot milk, snatched the phone from my hand. He saw the glaring red circle 4 days from now on the calendar. His fingers trembled as he zoomed in and out, then he whirled around and grabbed my hand in a panic. I calmly took my phone back. The day after tomorrow is Sylvie's performance. I was just making a note of it. Even after my explanation, Adrienne's heart still pounded with unease. His dark eyes flickered. "Then why are the days before it crossed out in red too?" he pressed. I was getting extremely annoyed, but I forced a patient smile to placate him. "You forgot, it's almost our anniversary." At this, Adrienne's heart settled. He knew it. Clara still loved him. He remembered how every year she would prepare a handmade gift for him on their anniversary. A wave of guilt washed over him, and his eyes filled with pain. He pulled me into a hug, stroking my back soothingly. "Clara, I know you've been put in a difficult position lately. Sylvie is like a sister to me, and this competition is really important to her. Once this is all over, we'll get married." As if to reassure me further, he took my hand and placed it on his chest, his eyes full of emotion. Clara, listen, I've always loved you. In 4 days after your competition is over, we'll be together forever. Trust me. I felt the heavy, forceful beat of his heart against my palm and felt a wave of nausea. I gently pulled my hand away and hummed a soft MHM. Adrienne smiled, the light in his dark eyes shimmering like a sunlit lake. Clara, you can't leave me, ever. The performance day arrived quickly. On the day of the show, Sylvie's piano skills seemed to have taken a sudden leap forward, and the two of us were perfectly in sync. As the last note faded, Sylvie looked out at the audience with a relieved smile. I danced with all my might. As the thunderous applause erupted from below the stage, I let out a deep breath, my eyes discreetly scanning the wings for a shadowy figure. If he hadn't agreed to be a ghost player, perhaps his own life would have turned out differently. Sylvie won the championship. After the guests had dispersed, I was backstage, gathering my things. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the door being locked from the outside. A jolt went through me, and a strong sense of unease washed over me. I dropped the dance costume in my hands and rushed to the door. After frantically jiggling the handle a few times to no avail, I finally sank to the floor in defeat. On the other side of the door, Sylvie dangled a key from her fingers, humming a cheerful tune as she leisurely turned the valve on a gas canister. The day before the performance, she had someone place the canister by the vent in the backstage dressing room, even making sure to block the security camera to avoid detection. No one was around at this hour, and the dressing room was so small. Clara probably wouldn't last long. Sylvie smirked, her eyes on the gleaming trophy nearby. She had finally gained her family's approval through piano. She had finally made Adrienne look at her twice. The piano was her everything. But this desperate ghoul, Clara, just had to walk right into the line of fire. It wasn't Sylvie's fault. If anyone was to blame, it was Clara for having such bad luck. Sylvie let out a cold laugh. She was about to walk away when she suddenly saw Adrienne heading towards her. Chapter 7. My phone was in the pocket of my jacket, but unfortunately, my jacket had disappeared while I was taking off my makeup. Just as I was thinking this was just some ordinary prank, I smelled a pungent odor. A warning bell went off in my head. I looked up and saw a white, hazy smoke snaking its way into the room. Soon, a cold sweat beaded on my forehead. It felt like a giant rock was crushing my chest, making it impossible to breathe. My vision grew blurry, and a numbing pain spread through my limbs. Fear washed over me like a tidal wave. With trembling hands, I grabbed a random piece of clothing from the table and frantically covered my nose and mouth. I pounded on the door with all my might, cold tears splashing onto the carpet. Just as I was about to give up hope, the door opened. A surge of joy went through me. "Help me," I cried out desperately, prying the door open with my fingers. I looked up with hope at the person who had come, but the sight that met my eyes sent me plummeting into an icy abyss, and I collapsed to the floor. It was Sylvie who had returned. She had been afraid Adrienne would find out she was the one who had locked me in, so she had gritted her teeth, opened the door, and come inside to pretend she was trapped with me. Sylvie let out a cold laugh. She slapped herself hard a couple of times, then grabbed my hand and scratched several bloody marks on her own arm. She gave me a vicious kick, and then started screaming for help at the top of her lungs. "Adrienne, help! Save me!" Hearing the cries, Adrienne's indifferent eyes quickly filled with panic. He rushed in, his eyes red as he scanned the smoke-filled room. He finally spotted the weak figures of Sylvie and me on the floor. In that instant, it felt as if a hand had brutally squeezed his heart, leaving him breathless. My consciousness was fading. My lungs felt like they were about to explode. As I saw Adrienne lift Sylvie and start to run, I desperately grabbed the hem of his pants, my voice a choked sob. "Help me!" Adrienne froze. He glanced at the pale face of Sylvie in his arms, then at me, lying on the floor. His throat felt tight, as if something was strangling him, and his eyes were filled with an agonizing struggle. After a long moment, he kicked me away and ran out, carrying Sylvie. I was violently shoved aside, a piercing pain shooting through my stomach. I watched as Adrienne ran away without a second glance. It wasn't until my vision went completely black that I finally accepted it. Adrienne had completely and utterly abandoned me. In the surging smoke, I closed my eyes in despair, the endless stream of tears chilling my heart. I managed a bitter smile. Perhaps I was destined to pay for this disastrous infatuation for the rest of my life. In the nick of time, a figure emerged from the dense smoke. He covered his nose and mouth, scooped me into his arms, and with a trembling voice called my name over and over, Clara, as he ran like a madman towards the exit. In my chaotic dreams, I suddenly heard a strong, powerful heartbeat. I struggled to open my eyes and saw Ethan Shaw, his eyes red-rimmed. As the oxygen mask was placed over my face, I grabbed his hand and managed to say, "Ethan, take me back to B-City." Ethan's voice was hoarse with emotion. He squeezed my hand tightly, his heart aching, and nodded firmly. "Okay." With that, he quickly turned and ordered someone to arrange for a plane. A few minutes later, his assistant rushed over with a team of elite doctors. Ethan carefully helped me onto the plane, and we left that place for good. Chapter 8. By the time Adrienne carried Sylvie out, the wail of sirens filled the air. A crowd of firefighters had already gathered by the fire trucks. "Is there anyone else inside?" A firefighter in a mask shouted at Adrienne. Adrienne's body trembled, and he tensed up completely. His hands, clutching Sylvie, were white-knuckled from the force of his grip. His face was drained of all color. "Yes," he yelled in a panic. "My fiancé is still in there." Adrienne set Sylvie down and, like a madman, tried to run back inside. He was quickly stopped by a firefighter. "Sir, the carbon monoxide levels inside are too high. It's not safe for you to go back and please. Calm down." Adrienne's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed the firefighter's collar and screamed hysterically, "Let me and my fiancé is in there," but he was no match for the 4 or 5 firefighters holding him back. In the end, he was restrained, forced to watch anxiously from the outside. As he watched the firefighters go in and come out empty-handed, a sharp panic seized his chest. He pressed a hand to his wildly beating heart, trying to calm his spiraling nerves. "Clara can't be dead. She loves me so much, how could she possibly leave me? Besides, 5 years ago, when she had risked her own life to pull him from the wrecked car, she had been badly injured too, but she had pulled through. She had to be alive. She had to be. Sir, we've searched everywhere. There's no one else inside." Even if there was, by now, they would have likely. The firefighter trailed off, seeing Adrienne collapse to the ground, seemingly unable to bring himself to say the word dead. "Impossible, you must not have looked properly, there was someone in there. Find her, I want to see her, dead or alive, whoever finds her. I'll give you anything you want." Adrienne staggered to his feet, his eyes severely bloodshot. He shook the firefighter violently, so agitated that he gagged a couple of times. Just then, a firefighter shouted that they had found someone. A wave of joy and hope surged through Adrienne. He knew it. Clara was tough. She wouldn't leave him all alone. Tears blurred his vision as he scrambled over, laughing and crying at the same time. The next second, the firefighters carried out a stretcher. On it lay a figure, burned beyond recognition, covered by a white sheet. "Mr. Sterling, our condolences." In that instant, Adrienne felt his breathing stop completely. Tears, like broken strings of pearls, soaked the white sheet. A dull ringing filled his ears. His fingers trembled as he reached out to lift the cloth, but he couldn't find the courage. An avalanche of regret crashed down on him, filling his heart until the cold spread to his limbs. It was all his fault. It was his fault for choosing Sylvie and abandoning her. He was the one who had forced Clara to dance at this performance. He was the one who had refused to save her. If it weren't for him, Clara would still be alive and well. Adrienne broke down in sobs, his usual elegant demeanor completely shattered. Snot and tears mingled on his face as he repeatedly cursed himself, collapsing to the ground in utter despair. The next moment, Adrienne lost consciousness and fainted on the spot. Not far away, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Sylvie's lips. The weight that had been hanging over her heart finally lifted, and she felt a sense of relief. Chapter 9. Adrienne woke up in a hospital. "You've always liked Sylvie, haven't you? If you ask me, Clara's short life isn't such a bad thing. It saves you the controversy of breaking off the engagement later. Adrienne, you can now be with Sylvie without any worries. Sylvie is your unforgettable first love. Now, you've finally gotten your wish." Beatrice Sterling clapped her hands, a smile on her face as she began to plan the wedding between her son and Sylvie. "I don't love Sylvie anymore." Adrienne lowered his head, the light in his eyes flickering. His face was so shadowed it was hard to read his expression. His voice was hoarse. Beatrice froze. What did you say? My only wife is Clara Hayes, Adrienne repeated. He then dismissed his family from the room and sat alone in the hospital bed, staring blankly into space. Tears streamed down his face unconsciously. It was as if he had aged 10 years in an instant, a faint air of death hanging about him. Memories of the past replayed in his feverish dreams like a kaleidoscope. He remembered Clara poring over cookbooks, making him a different breakfast every day. He remembered her waiting up for him in the living room at night, smiling at him with sleepy eyes and asking softly if he was tired. In the misty summer rain, a smiling Clara had clumsily handed him an umbrella. In the biting winter wind and snow, she had stood on her tiptoes to wrap a scarf around his neck, loop after loop. Day after day, season after season. He had liked Sylvie before, but when Clara had saved him 5 years ago without a second thought, his heart had already begun to waver. He had agreed to the engagement with Clara, and in the 4 years that followed, she had long since replaced, and even surpassed, Sylvie in his heart. When Sylvie returned, Adrienne had only treated her like a younger sister. He felt guilty for breaking his childhood promise to love her forever, which was why he had tried so hard to make it up to her recently. And by saving Sylvie and abandoning Clara, he considered that debt paid. Adrienne, I heard you were in a bad mood. Sylvie came in and sat down naturally on the edge of Adrienne's hospital bed. Next time, remember to knock. Adrienne's tone was distant, a clear line drawn between himself and Sylvie. Sylvie was taken aback, a flash of panic in her eyes. She quickly collected herself, her eyes darting around before she squeezed out a few crystal-clear tears that hung pitifully on her cheeks. Adrienne, are you blaming me? I didn't want this to happen. It was Clara, who was jealous of me winning the championship. She started a fight and locked me in there with her. I tried my best to pull her out, but she wouldn't let go, she sobbed as she spoke, her voice breaking. I know you resent me. I resent myself too. If only I hadn't tried to hold on to her, then I would have been the only one to die from the gas, and Clara wouldn't be dead. Adrienne rubbed his temples wearily. The mention of Clara's name brought another wave of suffocating pain to his chest. That's enough, he interrupted, his voice strained. I don't blame you. Sylvie's face lit up. She quickly grabbed his hand and asked, her voice choked with emotion, Then, are we, Sylvie, I only see you as a sister now. Even with Clara gone, that fact will not change. Sylvie froze. The next second, she gritted her teeth in hatred, a venomous resentment bubbling up from within. Clara is dead, so why is she still getting in my way? My methods were too gentle. I should have made sure she was completely, utterly dead, to avoid leaving this bad luck behind. Sylvie couldn't understand it. Clara was just some poor country bumpkin from an ordinary family. She was inferior in every way. What was there to love? But since Clara was dead, she didn't believe Adrienne could hold out forever. Sooner or later, he would come to his senses with that thought. A small smile returned to Sylvie's lips. Chapter 10. When Adrienne arrived at the crematorium, his mind was a complete blank. He stared numbly at the rising smoke. He continuously rubbed the wedding ring on his finger. Half an hour later, he emerged, clutching a square urn, his body racked with inconsolable sobs. Adrienne locked Clara's room and would spend most of the day inside, allowing no one to approach. He completely gave up smoking and racing, and even reported several illegal racing rings he knew about to the police. He retrieved the diaries from the trash and read them day after day. When he saw the ring tucked inside, he clutched his head in regret. He then took out the few photos he had of them together and covered his room with them. Cancel all my appointments for tomorrow. I'm going to the Puji Temple. His assistant's eyes widened in astonishment. Mr. Sterling, he stammered, but you've always hated that sort of thing. He remembered a time when he had asked for a day off to pray for his child's college entrance exams, and Adrienne had berated him for being superstitious, for having his head filled with nonsense. Adrienne slowly shook his head, his once bright eyes now dull and lifeless. I want to beg the gods, he said, his voice hoarse, to bring Clara back, to give me another chance. The assistant wanted to say something but held his tongue. He couldn't bear to shatter Adrienne's impossible fantasy, so he remained silent. Just as Adrienne was about to leave, Sylvie appeared with a cake, calling out to him sweetly to try it. She held out her injured hand pitifully. Adrienne, I hurt my fingers making this cake for you. Adrienne shot her a cold glance, his heart unmoved. If you're injured, see a doctor. I didn't ask you to make it." Sylvie froze, then stomped her foot, the anger she had been suppressing finally boiling over. "Adrienne Sterling, don't you forget. It was Clara Hayes who tried to kill me. Why are you blaming me for her death?" Seeing Adrienne pause, Sylvie puffed out her chest, a self-satisfied smirk on her face as she picked up the cake and ran after him. Just then, Adrienne's assistant, who had been helping the police with the investigation, rushed in. He leaned against the doorframe, panting for breath. "Mr. Sterling, we found something. Mrs. Hayes's death was deliberate. Furthermore, the security guard on duty that night said that Miss Monroe had borrowed the key to the backstage area the day before, claiming she needed it for something urgent. Miss Monroe was also at the scene when Mrs. Hayes died. According to the guard's testimony, the day after the incident, Miss Monroe cheerfully returned the key to him. So, the primary suspect at the moment is Miss Monroe." The assistant finished his report under the heavy gazes of both Sylvie and Adrienne, wiping the cold sweat from his brow as he forced himself to speak. In an instant, Adrienne slowly turned his head to look at Sylvie. The indifferent look in his eyes from a moment ago was now brewing a suppressed storm. The veins on his clenched fists bulged, and the sharpness in his features intensified severalfold. Sylvie had never seen Adrienne look so terrifying. Her face went white, and the cake in her hands crashed to the floor, shattering into a million pieces. Her lips trembled, her gaze darted about, her earlier smugness completely gone. Adrienne let out a cold, chilling laugh. Like a madman, his eyes bloodshot, he lunged forward and brutally seized Sylvie by the neck. His calm facade was torn apart by a raw, obsessive fury. He stared into Sylvie's face, which was slowly turning purple, and asked, one word at a time, "Did you kill Clara?" Chapter 11. The suffocating feeling of death washed over Sylvie like a tidal wave. Tears welled up in her eyes as she flailed her legs desperately, shaking her head with all her might. Adrienne abruptly released his grip. Sylvie collapsed to the floor with a thud, her legs trembling. She clutched her throat, gagging a few times as she looked at Adrienne in terror. She tried to scramble away, but the next second, one of his men grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back. Adrienne, it's me, it's Sylvie. You've always doted on me the most," she whimpered, trying to appeal to their shared past. "I did dote on you. I let you have your way in everything. But Clara is the person I love most now. She's my bottom line, and I will not allow you to harm her," Adrienne sneered, finding it hard to believe that the murderer was the girl he had grown up with. If this was true, then all the complaints Sylvie had made about Clara were probably lies too. The thought made the coldness in his eyes deepen. What really happened? Sylvie flinched, her legs giving way as she fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face, matting her hair. The red marks on her neck stood out, making her look pitiful. She hastily grabbed onto Adrienne's leg. I'll talk. I did borrow the key and return it that day, but it was Clara who asked me to. She begged me, saying she still wasn't good enough at dancing and that I had more sway than her. She even threatened that if I didn't help her, she would deliberately mess up during the competition and not let me win. Adrienne took the investigation report from his assistant and watched coldly as Sylvie lied. If he hadn't already known the whole story, seeing Sylvie's pitiful act now, he might have actually believed her. Adrienne had no patience for her fabrications. He took the thick file of reports and analysis and slammed it into her face. In an instant, white papers scattered through the air. Sylvie froze, frantically grabbing a sheet. As she read it, the color drained from her face. Her once lively eyes became hollow, and she slowly lowered her head. Page after page detailed her provocations against Clara, and there was even proof that she had faked her piano playing. Even the fact that she had schemed to get Clara to replace her injured master was laid bare. It had all been Sylvie's plan to drive Clara away. I will expose the fact that you faked your playing, and then I will send you back to the Monroe family and let them deal with you. Adrienne's eyes were filled with a dark fury. After reading through everything Sylvie had done, he no longer cared about their childhood friendship. His mind was filled with memories of the countless times he had hurt Clara for Sylvie's sake. His eyes were red with a mixture of guilt and regret for Clara, which he now unleashed entirely on Sylvie. Hearing this, Sylvie's vision went black. Uncontrollable tears streamed down her face, and she collapsed to the floor, her shrieks piercing the air. "No, Adrienne, I was wrong. I only did it because I love you so much. Please, don't do this to me." Adrienne showed no mercy. He immediately made a call to publicize Sylvie's fraudulent playing, and then had all her belongings packed up and thrown out of the Sterling house. Soon, the newspapers were filled with stories of Sylvie's fraud. All her previous awards were revoked, and even her cheating on exams while studying abroad was exposed. She was bombarded with hate from countless people online and was blacklisted by the entire piano community. In the pouring rain, Sylvie's makeup ran, her face a pathetic mess of colors. She wandered the streets like a lost soul, with nowhere to go. She didn't dare go back to the Monroe house. Ever since elementary school, her stepmother had taken over, and now her father only cared about his new wife and the son she had given him. Life at home was difficult, which was why Sylvie had been living at Adrienne's. Sylvie's biological mother had been counting on her piano skills to win back her father's favor. But now that her fraud was exposed, the Monroes would not let her off easy. At that thought, a shiver ran down her spine. The memory of her father's cold, disgusted gaze filled her with terror. With trembling hands, she took out her phone. She tried calling the friends she was usually close with, but all the calls went straight to voicemail. The messages she sent were all met with red exclamation marks. Sylvie's face twisted in anger. She let out a scream and started biting her nails, pacing back and forth in a panic. "It's all Clara's fault. If Clara hadn't tried to steal Adrienne from me, I wouldn't have done any of this. It's her fault. She must have poisoned Adrienne, made him blind to our history. It's bad enough that she died." But she couldn't even rest in peace. She had to drag me down with her. A loud clap of thunder echoed through the sky, and a bolt of lightning split the dark heavens. The fierce rain lashed down on Sylvie. Terrified, her legs gave way. She salvaged some important items from her soaked luggage, clutching them to her chest, and found some cash. Shivering from the cold, she tried to hail a cab. A taxi pulled up. Sylvie's face lit up, and she started to get in. The kind-hearted driver handed her a towel. "Oh, poor girl, you must be soaked. Use this to dry off. Hey, aren't you that phony who faked her piano playing? Get out, I don't drive shameless people like you." Once the driver recognized her, he snatched the towel back, shot her a disgusted look, and even spat on the ground. He then tried to push her out of the car. Sylvie's eyes widened in disbelief. She pulled a wad of cash from her pocket and offered it to him. "I have money. You won't drive me even if I pay you." The driver looked insulted. He snatched the money from her hand and threw it in her face, his anger flaring as he grabbed a nearby egg and hurled it at her. "Don't disgust me. Who wants your stinking money? It's dirty. Who knows what kind of shady things you've been up to? Get as far away from me as you can." Sylvie was pushed out and landed in a puddle of dirty water, which splashed all over her and made her choke. She gagged a couple of times, cursed the man, and got back up to try and hail another cab. But after an hour of trying, no one would pick her up. Instead, she ended up with more vegetable leaves and egg in her hair. A car slowly pulled up in front of her. Her face lit up, but when she looked up, she saw it was the Monroe family's butler. Chapter 12. A look of terror crossed Sylvie's pale face. She shook her head frantically, saying she wouldn't go back, and turned to run. But the ground was slippery, and she once again fell face first into a filthy puddle. The butler snorted coldly, his eyes scanning her egg and vegetable-covered form with a mixture of disdain and disgust. He shook his head and gestured to the burly bodyguards behind him, who then dragged her back to the Monroe house. The moment she stepped through the door, before she even had a chance to look up, a sharp slap landed across her face. "You waste of space after all I did to raise you, hoping you'd win back my status for me, and now look, your father's new woman can walk all over me. Sylvie Monroe, you've really outdone yourself. The whole reason I gave up my position as the main wife was so you could go abroad to practice piano. And what did you do? You cheated, smoked, got tattoos, and messed around. You didn't do a single good thing, but you didn't miss a single bad one. Is this how you repay me?" Sylvie's biological mother gritted her teeth, her expression one of utter disappointment. Seeing Sylvie cowering, her anger flared, and she grabbed a nearby feather duster and began beating her with it. Sylvie's back stung with a fiery pain, and she let out piercing screams, which attracted her father and his new wife, Regina Monroe. Seeing the first Mrs. Monroe in such a state, Regina couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. Sylvie really was a great help to her. She had been worried that if Sylvie became successful, her own position as the lady of the house might be threatened. But now, Sylvie had handed her a huge gift. Now, she could finally rest easy, and her son would no longer have to worry about being seen as illegitimate. With that thought, Regina gently took Mr. Monroe's arm. What a mess! What will people think of the Monroe family now? Oh, I thought my son was bad enough, but I never expected this from Sylvie. Mr. Monroe was already annoyed that the company's stock price had been affected by Sylvie. Her grating screams now just added fuel to the fire. He flew into a rage, strode over, and gave her a vicious kick. See? Sons are useful. Daughters just ruin the family. What a useless baggage, he spat, shooting her a disgusted look. I was hoping you could seduce Adrienne Sterling and bring some benefit to the family, but it seems I overestimated you. Sylvie's usual arrogance vanished completely. She clutched her stomach and writhed on the floor, repeatedly begging for forgiveness, her tears long gone as she mumbled apologies. Mr. Monroe let out a heavy sigh. Tomorrow, we'll hold a press conference and officially sever all parental ties with Sylvie Monroe. From now on, she is no longer a member of the Monroe family. Sylvie's eyes widened in shock. Like a dog, she scrambled over and clung to her father's leg, tears streaming down her face as she begged through the intense pain, her lips trembling. Dad, I'll never do it again. I still have value. Please don't abandon me. Mr. Monroe snorted and kicked her away. Sylvie then turned to her mother for help, but her mother just shot a fearful glance at her father and looked away, not daring to say a word. The next day, the Monroe family's bodyguards once again threw Sylvie and all her belongings out onto the street. Her credit cards were canceled, and the cash she had on hand quickly ran out. With no one to give her money, she had to find work on her own. She applied for jobs as a designer, a pianist, and a tutor. But before she could even complain about the low pay, the moment the employers saw her face, they all threw the contracts at her and told her to get lost. Desperate, Sylvie took on the jobs she had once looked down on most, working as a cleaner and a dishwasher. But after 2 days of back-breaking labor, she was fired again, cursed as a shameless phony. Within days, wrinkles and spots began to appear on her face. At just over 20, she had white hairs sprouting at her temples. She looked as if she had aged several decades, and no one would ever recognize her as the once glamorous Miss Monroe. She began to feel regret. She shouldn't have treated Clara that way. She should have just been a good little sister to Adrienne. If she had, maybe she would still be enjoying a life of luxury, still able to afford expensive clothes. Sylvie clutched her rumbling stomach and wailed. At this moment, she wished for Clara's resurrection even more than Adrienne did. At least then, she might have a chance at survival, a chance to eat a full meal. But her nightmare was far from over. The enemies she had made with her past arrogance and cruelty now saw her as an easy target, abandoned by both the Monroes and Adrienne. They ambushed her, dragging her by the hair into a deserted alley. Her former high school classmates, whom she had bullied, pried her mouth open and poured chalk dust and toilet water down her throat. Another held a pair of scissors and began hacking at her hair. When Sylvie saw one of them take out a hair straightener, a cold sweat broke out on her brow. She was so terrified all she could do was open her mouth and shake her head frantically, unable to even speak. Only tears streamed from her eyes. The girl in the lead sneered, pushing aside her hair to reveal a hideous scar. "Sylvie Monroe, are you scared now?" she said, her voice filled with deep hatred. "Back then, you were the one who burned my face with a straightener," the girl sniffled, her voice choked with emotion as she reminded Sylvie. All because I accidentally stepped on your foot. You ruined my face, you made it so I could never take my arts exams, so I could never show my face in public again. This is all your own doing." When the scorching hot iron touched Sylvie's arm, she let out a blood-curdling scream. The smell of her own flesh burning filled her nostrils. She gagged, feeling the muscles in her arms spasm in agony before she fainted. When she woke up, Sylvie expected to see Adrienne's concerned face, as she always had in the past. But she was still lying on the cold, hard ground. Sylvie gritted her teeth. She couldn't go on like this. As she was walking away, she heard a child nearby wave and say, "Goodbye, Aunt Sterling." Her eyes lit up. She remembered Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling had always doted on her. And Grandpa Sterling was so kind. They would surely help her with that thought. Hope reignited in Sylvie's eyes. She stumbled to her feet, one hand pathetically clutching her injured arm, and made her way towards the Sterling villa. Chapter 13. When Beatrice Sterling saw Sylvie, she didn't recognize her at first. The person before her had filthy, matted hair that reeked. Her cheeks were hollow and aged, her body so gaunt she looked like a female ghost. One of her arms was dripping blood, and she was a complete, wretched mess. Beatrice frowned and instinctively pinched her nose. When she met Sylvie's hopeful gaze, she looked away. "Oh, Sylvie, you're even worse off than Clara Hayes now. The Sterling family is a powerful one. We can't possibly take in a daughter-in-law who's been cast aside and has such a bad reputation, can we? A person needs to understand their own situation before they start making deals and begging for favors." Beatrice let out a dry laugh and gestured to the nearby butler, who then stepped forward and politely showed Sylvie the door. She had liked Sylvie in the past, but that was on the condition that Sylvie had the Monroe family backing her, that she could help her son's career, stabilize the Sterling family's foundation, and be presentable in public. Of course, that was much better than Clara. But now, no matter how much she had liked Sylvie before, it was best to keep her distance. Sylvie had grown accustomed to the cold shoulder over the past few days. Seeing that even Beatrice found her repulsive, she lost her composure. With a thud, she fell to her knees and began to wail, begging Beatrice to take her in. She was so poor she could barely afford a steamed bun. She didn't want to starve to death on the streets. Seeing Beatrice's impatient expression, Sylvie started shouting at the top of her lungs, "Adrienne, Grandpa Sterling, please help Sylvie. Sylvie Monroe, it seems that just kicking you out was letting you off too easy." Adrienne slowly descended the stairs, his eyes cold as he looked at Sylvie kneeling on the floor. He was stunned for a moment, but then he remembered what Sylvie had done, and his composure returned. Now, he only felt that she deserved whatever was coming to her. The thought that she was the one who had killed Clara made him wish he had never even met her. Grandpa Sterling, who had been woken from his nap, was helped down the stairs, leaning heavily on his cane. When he saw Sylvie, he let out a sad, regretful sigh. "Sylvie, I watched you grow up. How did you end up like this? A person must always be responsible for their actions. You killed Clara. The only thing I can do to help you now is to send you to prison and let the law deal with you." The hope that had just been rekindled in Sylvie's heart was extinguished, replaced by despair. She sat on the floor in a daze, the taste of blood on her chapped lips. She looked at her arm, then at her hair, and finally she slowly closed her eyes, allowing herself to be dragged away and shoved into a car. After everything she had been through, Sylvie finally saw the truth. If she hadn't done those things back then, she wouldn't have ended up in this state. She knew she was wrong, and it was time to face the consequences of her actions. Adrienne, worried that she might pull some other stunt on the way, decided to go with her to the prison. At the police station, Adrienne finished explaining the situation. As he was about to leave, a police officer rushed out and called after him. "You said the deceased's name was Clara Hayes?" Adrienne nodded. The police officer scratched his head, puzzled. He looked at the active file in his hands. "Clara Hayes isn't dead. Her file is still here. In fact, she just registered a marriage in B City a couple of days ago." Adrienne froze mid-stride, his pupils constricting. He whirled around and snatched the file, his heart pounding so fast in his chest that his hand trembled as he held the record. His eyes red, he stared at Clara's real face on the document. A long-lost excitement and vitality returned to his expression. Tears streamed down his face as he choked out, "Clara's not dead. I'm going to B City to find her." Chapter 14. Adrienne used some of his connections to find Clara's new phone number and address in the records. Staring at the piece of paper in his hand, Adrienne felt a mix of disbelief at having found her and a faint, unsettling trepidation. He wanted to call her immediately, but he didn't know what to say. Too many questions swirled in his mind, tormenting him. Clara had supposedly died in the performance hall, so why was she suddenly alive, and why was she in B City? The police said she had registered for marriage a few days ago, but Clara was his fiancée. His heart pounded with unease. He unfolded the paper with her number, then folded it again, trying to deceive himself with the thought that maybe Clara had amnesia, and that's why she had married someone else. But as he calmed down and thought about it, Adrienne suddenly remembered all the strange things that had happened in the month leading up to the incident. In the past, no matter how obedient and gentle Clara was, She would always get upset if she saw him with another woman, and she would require him to make the first move to make amends. But after the burn incident, she had just let it go. Adrienne couldn't help but remember the nurse's words at the hospital, "You're leaving soon," and the strange calendar on Clara's phone with the date of the incident circled. An unbelievable suspicion began to form in his mind. Could it be that Clara had been planning to leave him all along? No, impossible. She loved him so much. How could she bear to leave him? He only saw Sylvie as a sister. What was wrong with being nice to his sister? It was perfectly normal. He thought Clara would be understanding, that she would get why he was doing it. Adrienne had been planning to discuss their wedding with Clara right after Sylvie won the championship. Why couldn't she have just waited a little longer? A wave of panic washed over him. The more he thought, the more confused he became, fear consuming him. He clutched his head in anguish. Suddenly, he remembered something. He shot up and ran to Clara's bedroom. After searching high and low, he found the packed suitcase hidden in the closet. The suspicion was confirmed. Adrienne collapsed onto the bed. The phone rang. He slowly answered. The voice on the other end was clear. "Mr. Sterling, you were right. The body was indeed planted beforehand. It was just a woman of similar age who died in the fire. And on the day of the incident, the airline confirmed that a private plane did fly to B City. The owner of the plane is Ethan Shaw." Adrienne hung up. It was only then that he finally, belatedly, understood. Clara had faked her death that day. She had been planning to give up on him. After a long pause, he slowly took out the piece of paper with her number and dialed. Meanwhile, after Clara was brought back to B City, Ethan had been by her bedside every day, taking meticulous care of her. Ethan was very good to her, and gradually, it was as if they had returned to the carefree days of their childhood. Ethan and Clara had grown up next door to each other. Ethan's parents were always busy, so they often asked Clara's family to look after him. Ethan was 2 years younger than Clara, and his personality was the complete opposite of hers. He was lively and mischievous, but when it mattered, he was always the first to protect her. They did their homework together, walked home from school together, and bickered constantly, yet they were inseparable for over a decade. Over the years, Clara's family situation remained the same, but Ethan had built his own empire from scratch, becoming a new tycoon in B City through his own hard work. After Clara was discharged from the hospital, she and Ethan got their marriage license. They had recently started planning their wedding. "Your eyes must be tired from looking at all those invitations. Our mom made your favorite white fungus soup." Ethan's light brown eyes held a hint of a smile. He brought over a steaming bowl of soup and, picking up a spoon, was about to feed it to her. Clara blushed, her ears burning. She still wasn't used to the sudden transition from little brother to husband. Hearing him say, "our mom," made her heart skip a beat. She avoided his smiling gaze and took the bowl. "I can do it myself," she said softly. Ethan clearly didn't miss the shyness in her eyes, but he didn't point it out. Instead, he just smiled and playfully used her childhood nickname to tease her. "I'm just worried Clara Sis's hands are too tired to lift the bowl." Clara, who had just taken a spoonful of soup, was caught off guard by his words and choked, coughing a few times as she shot him a playful glare. A warm, ambiguous atmosphere enveloped them. Clara felt that the way Ethan looked at her was so intense it could make her long-dormant heart stir again. Ethan let out a soft chuckle. He was about to speak when the peaceful, cozy air was shattered by the shrill ring of a phone. Clara frowned and picked up her phone. She froze when she saw the number. Even though her new phone didn't have Adrienne's number saved, she had loved him for so many years that she had long since memorized it. It seemed he already knew she wasn't dead. "It's Adrienne, should I answer?" Clara turned to Ethan. The smile in Ethan's eyes faded. For a moment, he remembered the image of Clara, her face stained with tears, lying helplessly in the smoke. When he looked at the vibrating phone again, his eyes were filled with an icy chill, but his tone remained light and casual. "Go ahead, I haven't settled the score with him for what he did to you yet." Clara nodded and answered the phone. The voice on the other end was urgent. "Clara, what is it?" Hearing his voice, a wave of impatience and disgust washed over me. My tone was distant. Adrienne heard the coldness in my voice and faltered. "Clara," he said with a bitter laugh, "are you leaving me?" "Mr. Sterling, you'd best not say things that could be misunderstood. I'm married now." It would be best if we kept our distance and didn't contact each other in the future. The memory of Adrienne kicking her away in the smoke-filled room came rushing back, and a wave of nausea rolled in her stomach. Even though some time had passed, she could still feel the suffocating pain in her chest. Adrienne was silent for a moment, then his voice became dark. "Clara, I won't let you marry someone else. You can only be my wife." With that, he hung up. I looked at Ethan with worry, my head lowered as I nervously picked at my nails. My heart was pounding, and I felt extremely uneasy. A warm embrace suddenly enveloped me from behind. Ethan smiled and hugged me, his chin resting gently on my shoulder. His voice was low, but it had a strangely calming effect. He gently pulled my hands apart. "You're all grown up, but you still haven't kicked that habit of picking at your nails when you're worried." I turned to look at him and met his deep gaze. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Chapter 15. Seeing Clara in low spirits, Ethan decided to take her to pick out a ring. "This ring is from the famous True Love collection. You should try it on," the sales associate said with a smile, presenting a particular design. Clara's eyes lit up, but then she looked at the faint mark on her finger and the light in her eyes dimmed. She had once looked forward to the day she would wear a ring, but her entanglement with Adrienne had left her completely exhausted. Clara subconsciously began to resist the idea of a ring, seeing it as a form of confinement, a shackle. Ethan tilted his head slightly, seeming to sense her hesitation and distraction. He gently took her hand and led her to another counter. "Ethan, I'm sorry, Clara's lips trembled, a mixture of struggle and guilt flashing across her face. She bit her lip, unsure how to voice her thoughts. No man wanted a wife who wouldn't wear a wedding ring. Ethan looked at her gently for a long time, then softly ruffled her hair until her dark locks were a mess. She looked up at him with a playful glare, and only then did he let out a low chuckle, his spring water-like eyes filled with a gentle pity. "Clara Hayes, we agreed when we were kids. If you don't like something, you don't have to do it." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at him in disbelief. "But a ring symbolizes—" "The person is more important than the ring," Ethan interrupted softly. Clara stood there like a dazed goose, staring at him foolishly. In that moment, everything suddenly felt real. Ethan was no longer the mischievous little kid from their childhood. He was a man who could stand in front of her and protect her. For some reason, Clara felt a prickling in her nose, and a misty haze clouded her vision. The sour bubbles in her heart rose and transformed into tears at the corners of her eyes. She slowly shook her head. "Ethan, that's not fair to you." She didn't want to transfer the pain she had suffered from Adrienne onto the innocent Ethan, even if he was willing. Ethan smiled helplessly and, with a doting look, took her hand and gestured to a ring in the display case. "I knew you wouldn't want one, so this one is just right." He slowly slipped it onto her finger. Clara stared at the unique design with curiosity. "It's detachable. If you don't want to wear it, you can take it off. It won't confine you or become a shackle on your beautiful finger." Ethan paused, then took her hand seriously, his tea-colored eyes shining with earnestness. "If one day I become a burden to you, you can bravely give me up. Just like this ring." Clara was stunned for a long time. In the long, heart-fluttering moment, she was in a daze. She remembered how, when they were kids, Ethan would always complain that his mom didn't give him enough money for ice cream, only enough for one expensive one and one cheap one. He would always give the expensive one to her. Clara had called him stupid, saying they could have bought two identical, medium-priced ones, but the young Ethan would always stubbornly shake his head. "I have to give you the best." From childhood to adulthood, Ethan had always been good to her. It was a goodness that didn't need comparison, that had no levels or weight. It was, simply, the best. After a long pause, Clara clearly felt a throb in her chest. She finally looked up at him and laughed. "You won't become my burden, and I won't give you up." After buying the ring, Ethan insisted on watching a movie and eating popcorn. He always grumbled that they were in a marry first, love later situation and hadn't had a chance to go through the dating phase. When it came to choosing a movie, Ethan didn't hesitate to pick a horror film. Clara laughed and tilted her head, teasing him. "Ethan, you used to be the most scared of horror movies. You even wet your pants in the 3rd grade." Clara had always loved horror movies, but Ethan was terrified of them. Even so, he would always watch them with her, saying he was trying to be manly. A glint appeared in Ethan's eyes. His smiling face showed no signs of being bothered by her teasing. Instead, he leaned in close to her ear, a mischievous look in his eyes, and whispered, "It's okay. When I get scared, I can hide in your arms." Clara's face turned red, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. She cleared her throat, pretending not to have heard his playful teasing, and puffed out her chest. "Fine, I'll protect you, you scaredy cat." Ethan hummed in agreement. Seeing Clara's righteous expression, he couldn't hold back a muffled laugh, which earned him a few light punches on the shoulder. Ah, domestic abuse so soon after getting our license. Ethan took the popcorn and, with one arm around Clara, headed into the theater, complaining pitifully. A young couple passing by overheard and let out a soft laugh. Clara's face burned. She frantically glanced around, stomped her foot, and shot him a glare before striding ahead. Ethan chuckled and jogged to catch up, ruffling her soft hair as he coaxed her. My bad, my bad." Meeting her annoyed gaze, he blinked innocently, his tea-colored eyes as clear as an autumn lake, still filled with infinite affection and doting. "You can't blame me. I've missed you so much for so many years." Clara froze. So many years. From the day she had saved Adrienne 5 years ago, she had automatically distanced herself from all the men in her life, including the very, very good to her Ethan. The moment she graduated from high school, she had eagerly flown to a city and stayed at the Sterlings, completely forgetting about the Ethan who had been waiting for her to come back. When the movie ended, Clara took the initiative and held Ethan's hand. As their warm hands met, it felt as if their heartbeats were in sync. She whispered a soft, "I'm sorry." Ethan, however, simply enveloped her small hand in his and, with a playful wink, whispered back like a schoolboy, "It's okay." Seeing Clara's eyes slowly redden and fill with tears, Ethan panicked, mentally kicking himself for saying that extra sentence. As if to prove his point, he urgently cupped her face and explained frantically, "I did it willingly. It has nothing to do with you." Clara stared at him for a long moment, then let out a soft fit of laughter. They walked out with the crowd, hand in hand. But just as they stepped outside, the happy smile on Clara's face froze. A long, absent shadow fell over her heart. It was Adrienne. He was staring fixedly at her, and Ethan's tightly clasped hands, the bloodshot veins in his eyes looking like they were about to burst. He had probably rushed here, as he hadn't even had time to shave the bluish stubble on his face. "Clara," Adrienne said, his voice heavy, "you've had your fun, come home with me." Chapter 16. A cold sweat began to form in Clara's hand. Ethan felt it and silently tightened his grip, as if trying to give her courage. Clara took a deep breath and looked at Adrienne seriously, her tone firm. "Adrienne, I don't love you anymore, and I'm getting married now." Adrienne looked as if he had heard a joke. He suddenly rushed forward, and without another word, grabbed Clara, trying to pull her away. But the next second, Clara violently shook him off. She stared at him coldly. "I can't stand living a life where I'm constantly being compared to someone else. I can't accept being the one who's always abandoned. When I was with you, I was always afraid. For 4 years, I carried the burden of the Sterling family's malice and the outside world's gossip all by myself, and you just stood by and watched." Adrienne was speechless, unable to respond. His throat bobbed and he lowered his gaze, his eyes filled with anguish. He knew in his heart that what Clara said was true. Clara took another deep breath, as if trying to suppress the sob in her throat, and looked straight at him. "For 5 years, every step I took in our relationship was a step I took towards you. Now, I'm tired, I don't want to anymore." Ethan pursed his lips, his eyes filled with pain as he looked at Clara. Hearing her words, Adrienne felt as if someone had brutally squeezed his heart. His breath caught for a moment. The next second, he lunged forward to grab her hand. But he was blocked by Ethan, who stepped in front of her and gave him a powerful shove, sending him sprawling to the ground. Ethan's eyes were cold as he stared down at him. Seeing him lying there pathetically, he stepped forward, grabbed his collar, and hauled him to his feet. "Adrienne Sterling, have some self-respect." Adrienne's eyes were bloodshot. After getting up, his gaze remained fixed on Clara. He moved his lips, his eyes full of deep emotion. "Clara, you said before that you wanted a swing in the yard. I've already had one installed. You also said you liked incense in your room. I had a famous perfumer create a special blend for you. I'm really different now. I know you like sweet things, that you don't eat cilantro, and I even know you hate onions. If you don't like living with my family, we can move out when we get back. We don't have to deal with my mom and dad. If you feel insecure, I'll transfer half of my shares to you." Ethan let out a cold laugh and looked at him sarcastically. "Mr. Sterling, I think you've got it all wrong. Clara is allergic to most incense. She loves spicy food. When we were kids, she would put all the cilantro and onions she could find in her noodles." Adrienne froze, a look of confusion in his eyes. He looked at Clara nervously. Impossible. When Clara was with him, she had always been like that. They had so many habits in common that it had even surprised him. Clara pursed her lips and was silent for a long moment. It seemed she was remembering something sad and oppressive, and she couldn't help but frown. "Adrienne, Ethan is right. The swing was because I felt bad that you were always in the yard on the phone for work without a chair. The incense was because I was worried about you being stressed and not sleeping well. You like sweet things, so to please you, I said I did too. The same goes for all those other little habits." Clara managed a resigned smile. "Come to think of it, I really did sacrifice a lot of myself just to make you happy." Adrienne staggered back a few steps in disbelief, his expression turning blank, his dark eyes losing their focus. "To make me happy," he repeated numbly. He remembered the dining table, always filled with sweet dishes. The incense was always in his room. He had seen Clara put a lot of cilantro in her noodles once, but he hadn't thought anything of it. Adrienne clenched his fists in regret. How could he have missed all these strange signs? Ethan didn't want to see Clara upset anymore, so he took her hand and led her away. Clara thought that once Adrienne had his answer, he would go back. But for the next few days, he stuck to them like glue. Chapter 17. They went for a wedding dress fitting, and Adrienne followed. When Clara chose a dress, he would ruin it by buying it first. They went to the wedding venue for a rehearsal, and Adrienne followed, disrupting the proceedings. Even when they were just having afternoon tea, Adrienne would have the nerve to pull up a chair and sit between them. Clara didn't mind for herself, but she was worried that Ethan would be upset. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "What exactly do you want?" Seeing that Clara was finally willing to speak to him, Adrienne's eyes lit up. He sat up straight and said excitedly, "Clara, I know I let you down with Sylvie, but I won't let it happen again." With that, he started listing all the punishments he had doled out to Sylvie over the past few days. "I was deceived by Sylvie before, but now I see that you're the one who's good to me, that you're the most important person to me. So you think it's all Sylvie's fault?" Clara interrupted, her tone impatient. Adrienne froze, a look of bewilderment and confusion on his face. He didn't seem to understand what was wrong with what he had said. He looked at Clara's disappointed gaze and tried to think. Wasn't it Sylvie's fault? Without her, he and Clara would be happily married by now. Clara wouldn't have been hurt and left, and he wouldn't have had to chase her all the way here. He and Clara had been in love for 5 years. If it weren't for Sylvie's appearance, they would still be the same as before. Clara let out a sarcastic laugh. Seeing Adrienne's bewildered expression, a deep sense of sadness washed over her. For the first time, she couldn't understand why she had ever fallen in love with him. And suddenly, she felt that Sylvie, as vicious as she was also, like her, pitifully pathetic. Ethan scoffed, kindly helping Adrienne solve the puzzle. "Sylvie is certainly at fault, but her fault is nothing compared to yours. It was your repeated favoritism and indulgence that gave her the confidence to bully Clara again and again. And even before Sylvie, your coldness was hurtful enough." Adrienne's face went deathly pale. A complex mix of emotions swirled in his eyes first, a dawning realization, then an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He thought back on everything that had happened. He had allowed Sylvie to verbally abuse Clara, had let her throw scalding hot soup on her. He had noticed that something was wrong with Clara, but whenever Sylvie came around, he would always instinctively put Clara's needs aside. He knew he had wronged Clara, but at night, he would always tell himself, "Clara has been through so much over the years, what's a little more? Clara loves me so much, even if I make a small mistake, she won't be able to stay mad at me." For 5 years, he knew the outside world looked down on Clara's ordinary family. He knew people called her a gutter snipe, a toad lusting after a swan, but he had never once stood up for her. Adrienne looked up, suddenly finding it hard to face Clara. The events of the past 5 years, like tiny snowflakes, had accumulated into an avalanche that had buried her. A belated sense of remorse now consumed him. Adrienne stumbled out of the coffee shop, his eyes vacant. As he walked, he felt a heavy weight of guilt pressing down on him. But he couldn't just give up on Clara. He loved Clara. She was his fiancée. 5 years couldn't just be thrown away like that. He wasn't willing to accept it. Adrienne clenched his fists. After a long moment of thought, he suddenly remembered Clara's aunt and mother. Chapter 18. Adrienne knew that Clara listened to her aunt more than anyone. Her aunt had gone abroad through her own hard work and had become the most successful person in the Hayes family upon her return. When the door opened, Clara's mother and her sister exchanged a look, their eyes filled with an unwelcoming glint. "The high and mighty Mr. Sterling has graced us with his presence. What can we do for you?" Clara's mother was known for being blunt and not having the best temper. In the past, she had held her tongue because her daughter loved him, but now she could finally speak her mind. Adrienne faltered. He had brought a large pile of expensive supplements, which he placed by the door, his attitude humble to the point of being subservient. "Aunt, please, I'm begging you, convince Clara to give me another chance." Hearing this, Clara's mother thought of what Ethan had told them about how her daughter had nearly been killed by him, how Adrienne had not only refused to save his own wife, but had even kicked her. A wave of anger washed over her. She turned and threw the supplements out onto the street. Clara's aunt, who had a milder temper, quickly intervened. "Sis, doing this will only lead to gossip later." Clara's mother let out a cold laugh, her heart pounding with anger, her face flushed. She pointed a finger at Adrienne and scolded, "Adrienne Sterling, you have the nerve to come here." "What is it this time? First it was a Sylvie Monroe, next it'll be a Haley Monroe, a Lindsay Monroe. How many times does my daughter have to nearly die at your hands before you're satisfied? The Sterling family is a powerful one. I get that you look down on us common folk. But that doesn't mean you can treat my daughter like she's not even human." Adrienne stood there silently, taking the scolding. After being kicked out, he continued to stand by the door, begging for forgiveness. It was the rainy season, and a sudden downpour began to fall, drenching him completely. His hair and clothes were soon sopping wet. Passers-by hurried along, casting strange looks at the motionless Adrienne. From morning till night, the rain didn't stop. Adrienne stood with his head lowered, having been there for a full day. The damp cold seeped into his bones through his wet pants, his knees aching with a stabbing pain. His head was spinning from being in the rain all day. Clara's aunt sighed and picked up an umbrella from by the door. The rain above him suddenly stopped. Adrienne slowly looked up and saw the umbrella. His voice was hoarse, and he begged with a choked sob, "Aunt Iris, I really know I was wrong. Please, will you help me? Clara has always loved you the most, and she always listens to you." Aunt Iris pursed her lips, the words rolling around on her tongue, but she didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence, she said softly, "Go home." Adrienne's eyes reddened. He closed them in pain, feeling a dull ache in his chest. In the endless pain, he just stubbornly repeated, "I'm not going home." Aunt Iris noticed the unnatural flush on his face and, reaching out, felt the abnormal heat. She frowned, "Adrienne, you have a fever, go home." Hearing this, Adrienne's head shot up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He let out a laugh and said numbly, "Yes, I have a fever. Clara always used to worry about me the most when I was sick. Now that I have a fever, she'll definitely forgive me." Adrienne fumbled for his phone in his pocket, his hands trembling so much he could barely press the screen. As he listened to the cold dial tone, his heart pounded, and a nervous sweat broke out on his brow. Aunt Iris sighed, left the umbrella, and went back inside. Adrienne wiped the tears from his eyes and stubbornly dialed Clara's number again and again. After what felt like an eternity, the call finally connected. Adrienne's eyes lit up and he stammered nervously, "Clara, I have a fever." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Ethan's cold voice came through. "She's in the shower." Adrienne's heart sank to the pit of his stomach. The phone slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. His arm dropped limply to his side, and he lowered his head in the drizzling rain, feeling completely helpless. "Who was that?" Clara's head poked out from the kitchen. Ethan sullenly handed her the phone, his voice sulky. "Adrienne Sterling. I told him you were in the shower." Seeing his jealousy, which he refused to admit, Clara let out a soft fit of laughter. She rewarded him with a gentle pat on the cheek and said softly, "MHM, you did the right thing." Ethan turned his head away, a rare blush creeping up his ears. After a moment of hesitation, he said he has a fever. Clara's hand, which was clearing the dishes, paused for a moment. Then she resumed her normal composure and said lightly, "That has nothing to do with me anymore." With that, she handed the dishes to Ethan, tapped him on the head, and said with a smile, "Stop being so jealous, go eat your favorite sweet and sour pork ribs. I spent a long time making them, you know." A smile spread across Ethan's face, and he hummed in agreement, beginning to set the table. The small table was filled with the two of them, their eyes crinkled in smiles. The warm yellow light flickered, and the glossy, exquisite dishes, mixed with Clara's soft complaints, created an exceptionally warm and cozy atmosphere. Ethan paused mid-bite, and then a slow smile spread across his face. His childhood dream had actually come true. "Ethan, I'm sorry." Clara suddenly put down her chopsticks, her eyes filled with guilt. "These past few days, you've had to put up with so much because of my past. Adrienne's problems really have nothing to do with you." "What do you mean, nothing to do with me?" "He's trying to steal my wife." Ethan, who hadn't even had time to swallow his food, hurriedly interrupted Clara's self-blame. Seeing the faint worry on Clara's face, he put a piece of pork rib in her bowl and calmly reassured her, "Don't worry. I'm here for everything." "Do you think he'll just keep pestering us like this?" Clara asked, a conflicted look on her face as she chewed on the end of her chopstick, her brows furrowed. "No, he won't. I'll figure something out." When Adrienne woke up, he was alone in the hospital room. Clara hadn't come. A flash of disappointment crossed his deep, dark eyes. Adrienne suddenly found himself unwilling to face reality, wishing he could just sleep forever. But he wasn't willing to give up just like that. What if this was Clara's test for him? Maybe she just wanted to see how determined he was. If he just persisted a little longer, he could win her back. Chapter 19. The peaceful, cozy atmosphere was shattered by the shrill ring of the doorbell. Before the butler could even stop him, Adrienne had burst in. "Adrienne Sterling, are you ever going to stop?" Clara felt a fire ignite in her heart, and her voice was filled with impatience. She couldn't understand why Adrienne was doing this. When she had been with him, he had always acted so nonchalant. Yesterday, when her mother had angrily described Adrienne's visit, she had felt disgusted by his sudden, inexplicable display of deep affection. "Clara, I was only partial to Sylvie because I felt I owed her. From the beginning to the end, you were the only one in my heart. I was planning on marrying you as soon as I had dealt with the Sylvie situation. I never thought she would be so vicious, that she would try to kill you. I know I was wrong now. I'll take good care of you from now on." As he spoke, Adrienne began to pull items out of his bag one by one. Photos of them together, the pottery they had made, and Clara's thick diary. "Clara, snap out of it, will you? We were together for 5 years. We traveled together, made crafts together. We have so many happy memories. And this your diary. You've loved me for so many years. We were about to get married. If you give up now, won't all those years of persistence have been for nothing?" Adrienne's usually calm face was now etched with a clear sadness and reluctance. He grabbed Clara's hand and tried to pull off her new ring, but she violently shook him off. "Clara, you should be wearing our ring." Adrienne's face was filled with a stubborn determination. Using his strength, he grabbed her hand again and, despite her resistance, tried to wrench the ring from her finger. Ethan, who had just returned, his eyes turning cold, his gaze filled with a terrifying fury, didn't even have time to take off his coat before he strode over and punched Adrienne. Adrienne instantly let go of Clara and stumbled to the ground. He wiped the blood from his mouth and, with a look of defiance, glared at Ethan, then shot up to hit him back. Clara's heart lurched. She instinctively jumped in front of Ethan, shouting, "Don't!" She first checked Ethan's fist with concern, then turned to glare at Adrienne with a look of vigilance and disgust. This instinctive display of care and favoritism stung Adrienne's eyes. Behind Clara, Ethan's lips curved into a barely perceptible smile. The suppressed anger in Adrienne's heart finally boiled over. His last shred of hope was completely crushed by her action. A flood of rage poured into his eyes, and he pointed a disbelieving finger at Ethan, questioning Clara. "What's so great about Ethan Shaw? I can give you everything he can give you, and even things he can't. What's so great about him that you're protecting him like this?" Clara's round, dark eyes were bright as she said with absolute certainty, "Ethan wouldn't make me wait." "Can you say the same?" Adrienne was speechless. The pent-up anger finally erupted into a fist aimed at Ethan. In the brief exchange of blows, it was clear to him that Ethan had some training. Ethan wasn't hit, but he didn't hit Adrienne again either. At the end, when Adrienne was completely exhausted, he just managed to bump Ethan with his shoulder, and Ethan suddenly collapsed to the ground, a look of pain on his face. Adrienne froze. He had thrown much harder punches before, which Ethan had easily dodged. His last move had been so slow. How could he possibly be hurt? Before he could think anymore, Clara rushed to Ethan's side, her arms around him, tears streaming down her face as she frantically checked him for injuries. "Adrienne Sterling, are you done acting like a mad dog? What are you doing here, picking fights? If anything happens to Ethan, I'll hate you for the rest of my life." Clara's cold eyes were filled with contempt and disgust. Adrienne's lips trembled. He wanted to say in a weak, pale voice that he hadn't, but then he saw Ethan's triumphant smirk. He gritted his teeth in anger, snatched his jacket from the floor, and stormed out. "Does it still hurt?" Clara gently applied medicine to his face with a cotton swab, her eyes filled with concern. Ethan winced and let out a hiss, his face contorted in a pitiful expression of pain, even though he barely felt anything. Seeing this, Clara's guilt and heartache intensified. She became even more gentle with her touch, her voice soft as she chided him. "Next time, don't fight with him. It's not worth it." After applying the medicine, Ethan asked her what kind of wedding she wanted. Clara lowered her head and thought for a moment. "Ethan, let's go on a trip." Chapter 20. On the wedding day, the venue was lavishly and grandly decorated. Ethan and Clara's happy smiles flashed across the large electronic screen, and even the bus stop signs along the road were plastered with celebratory blessings. Ethan knew Clara loved white camellias, so he had spent a fortune to have them flown in and arranged throughout the venue. As a child, Clara's favorite was a pink wedding dress. She said white was unlucky. Ethan had remembered that for many years, and now he had her wear a simple, elegant pink one. Colorful, dreamlike bubbles floated in the air. The dark green lawn had been trimmed into scenes from their unique childhood memories, from their first words and steps to their awkward teenage years and now, their mature, adult lives. The 4 o'clock sun was as soft and gentle as foam. The sky was clear after the rain, and a faint rainbow could be seen on the other side of the blue sea. Ethan tightly held her hand and led her to the decorated wedding venue. "Why are we here 3 hours early?" Clara asked with a smile, letting him lead her as they ran freely on the seaside lawn. "Because there's a surprise," Ethan whispered mysteriously. Clara was stunned as he led her to the center of the red carpet. Ethan knelt on one knee, slowly took out a silver ring, and looked at her with his sincere, spring water-like eyes, each word solemn. "Miss Clara Hayes, will you marry me? For richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health." Before he could finish, Clara's eyes slowly curved into a smile, and she said with certainty, "I do." As the cool touch of the ring once again graced her finger, Clara slowly raised her hand. The dazzling diamond sparkled under the bright sun, not to be outshone. Ethan's hand covered hers, and the light filtered through their fingers, shining steadily on them. "Let's go." "Where are we going?" Clara asked, a look of confusion on her face. Ethan smiled, his cheerful voice exceptionally clear in the fresh air. To travel, of course. Meanwhile, Adrienne had arranged for a large number of bodyguards to crash the wedding. After checking the plan for the third time, his anxious heart finally settled. No matter what, he had to get Clara back first. Adrienne believed that with so many years of history between them, Clara couldn't be completely indifferent to him. Adrienne arrived at the wedding an hour early. He was momentarily dazed by the grandness of the venue, but he gritted his teeth. He wouldn't let Clara suffer. Even if Clara went back with him, he would give her an even grander wedding than this. As the wedding time approached, Adrienne's palms grew sweaty, but he still clutched his phone tightly, his dark eyes fixed on the stage, his heart pounding. He was waiting for a message from his bodyguards. The moment Clara appeared, they would take her away, and Adrienne would hold off Ethan. As the sky began to darken, Adrienne felt a strange sense of unease looking at the empty venue. The wedding was supposed to start at 7, but it was already 6:30, and there was still no one here. The more Adrienne thought about it, the more something felt wrong. He frantically searched for any related news. Just as he was realizing he might have been tricked, his assistant's call came through. "Mr. Sterling, bad news. Mrs. Sterling has already boarded a plane with Ethan Shaw." They changed the wedding to a destination wedding at the last minute and informed the guests not to come just half an hour ago. It seems they did it on purpose to avoid you. Adrienne shot up, kicked over a chair, his face terrifyingly dark. A raging fire burned in his chest and his eyes. He squeezed his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. Useless. Book me a ticket, I'm going after them. Adrienne chased them all the way to the airport. He stared at the plane that had just taken off for Italy, his fists clenched. His assistant rushed over and handed him a ticket. Adrienne's face was grim. He used his connections to get through the fast track, but he was stopped just before he could board the plane. A flight attendant stood in front of him, holding an emergency phone. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Adrienne Sterling?" Adrienne was in a hurry to get on the plane and nodded impatiently. The flight attendant breathed a sigh of relief and respectfully handed him the phone. "There's an urgent call for you." The moment Adrienne took the phone, he heard his father's stern voice. "Adrienne, there's trouble at the company. You need to come back right away." Ethan had built his empire in the new energy sector, while the Sterling family had always relied on traditional industries. Recently, Ethan had used the cost-saving advantages of new energy to lure away many of the Sterling's old clients. A large portion of them were major clients with large volume transactions. The Sterling's products weren't selling, their cash flow was broken, and many departments that needed funding could no longer operate normally. His father's voice on the other end of the line sounded as if he had aged 10 years. He let out a heavy sigh. "Adrienne, the company is in trouble, and your mother has fallen ill. Just let it go with Ethan." Adrienne clenched the phone tightly, his eyes filled with an agonizing struggle. On one side was the business his ancestors had worked so hard to build. On the other was Clara. After a long pause, Adrienne's hand slowly dropped. The anger in his eyes from a moment ago had faded into a dull gray. Under the confused gazes of the people around him, he slowly walked off the plane. Watching the plane take off, Adrienne slowly closed his eyes. He had lost. Everything was beyond repair. Chapter 21. "So, this was your plan all along?" On the plane, Clara's eyes widened in astonishment as she looked at the detailed travel itinerary Ethan handed her. "Not exactly. I only started planning it after you said you wanted to travel," Ethan said, stroking her head. "So, the guests and our moms, everything's been taken care of?" Clara asked, a faint worry on her face as she looked up at him. Ethan smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Of course. They were all very supportive of us taking a break." From the day he had brought Clara back, he had been studying the Sterling's business, transitioning his own company to poach their clients, all to ensure that one day, Adrienne could no longer hurt her. When he heard Clara wanted to travel, he had planned a fake wedding to keep Adrienne occupied. The days that followed were something Clara felt she would never forget for the rest of her life. They walked hand in hand through the streets of Italy in late autumn, under the dim lights, their feet crunching on the brown, withered leaves. They celebrated a colorful Christmas in the gentle winter snow, playing cards with new friends around a warm fire. In the eternal spring, they swam in the clear blue waters of the Mediterranean, ran along the sun-drenched beaches, and played volleyball with joyful laughter. Clara dragged a reluctant Ethan to try extreme rock climbing, and Ethan, in turn, followed her everywhere, shielding her from the summer sun and wrapping her in a scarf in the winter, terrified that she would get sick. They traveled for a whole year, finally returning to B-City for the new year. The two families happily made dumplings together, reminiscing about their days as next-door neighbors. Ethan was clumsy and could never seem to make a proper dumpling. Clara teasingly told him to go watch TV. But Ethan, just like when he was a child, stubbornly stuck out his neck and said, "I may be clumsy, but I can learn." His words made both families burst into laughter. Meanwhile, Adrienne had little time to grieve. He had rushed back to a city on the next flight. Once there, he spent his days dealing with one crisis after another, trying to find investors and solve the company's cash flow problems. At night, he would go to the hospital to take care of his mother. Beatrice had a heart condition and had collapsed when she heard about the company's troubles. Now, she needed to rest in the hospital. Seeing her son so exhausted, she began to regret her past cruelty towards Clara. Adrienne threw himself into his work, becoming a true workaholic in their social circle. People said he was tireless, like a machine that only knew how to work. But only he knew the truth. He had to work because he was so tired. It was the only way he could numb his pain. At night, when he closed his eyes, his mind would be filled with memories of everything Clara had done for him. He suppressed his sadness, his happiness, even his most normal emotional reactions, as if trying to punish himself for his past coldness towards her. Gradually, he lost the ability to feel emotions. He no longer knew what joy, anger, or sorrow was. He just worked numbly day after day, relying on medication to sustain his basic life functions. Seeing what had become of Adrienne, the entire Sterling family regretted their harsh treatment of Clara. But it was too late for regrets. The end